Hello? Hi, Christine. Seems to be working now.
Good. Yeah, I guess there was like a mysterious man behind the curtain that had to let us in or something.
It just kept saying that it was waiting for the host to let me in or something, and it just never happened.
Same. Yeah, I'm not sure who the host is.
That may be the issue.
Yeah, we can
Before
ask
we get
that
off
maybe.
the meeting today, we should probably um, deal with housekeeping issues like that so that we don't have the problem here too forward.
Yep, makes sense to me. I know Scott and Tagliata is going to join. He just
Yeah,
called me confused as well.
yeah, texted me and said, was I sitting at a prompt? And I said yes, and he said, well, then he wouldn't worry because obviously it was a
He
wider
was,
problem than just him.
he was in good company,
Yeah, well, the first time you do anything, it takes a little bit of extra, and so I'm not surprised. But
especially at City Hall, it seems.
it's just the wonders of technology. It is so much better than it used to be, but it has so far still to go. And I'm sure that you who have to do Zoom now, like most of your life, it seems like are aware of all of the challenges. Here we go. Here comes Anthony.
Awesome.
I clicked the wrong link. I was an attendee. And I'm
Oh,
wondering,
Oh, well, at least you were an attendee then. That was good. I couldn't even get in.
oh, Scott is too. I'm going to promote him to panelist.
Oh, okay. Was
super.
was mine attendee or was it a panelist?
I They sent us individual links
Uh-huh.
um to log in, and that's what I use. So I don't know if other folks use. There was a general link too.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I'm not sure which.
Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly happened. They sent me a second link because we continue to
Yeah.
struggle with I appear to be the only one that's on Microsoft Office Suite 365, which doesn't talk very well with Google. And so we've
No.
been having a few problems in terms of my invitations showing up on a calendar that doesn't exist because because it's not the Outlook calendar anyway. And so they sent me a separate link, and so maybe I got one that was panelists that was a separate link, who knows.
Yeah. Anthony, Anna, and I were just saying we're going to try and figure out who the host is. I'm not sure who we were waiting to start the meeting. Um, do you happen to have any idea?
Let me see. I just saw an email.
Yeah, it just says host. It doesn't tell us who it is at that point.
I think it was someone in the counselor's office because Sheena
Yeah, I
just
think it
texted to
is.
say my apologies. So maybe someone in her office was
Maybe
the
it's Karen.
Can
Yeah.
maybe it was
can
Karen.
you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Scott.
All right, thank you. Thank you. How are you all? Good. I'm
Mhm.
just yeah, I think Sheena called me about this, so I'm assuming she's the host. But
Yeah, but I don't think she actually flips the switch or whatever. That's the key is to know
okay.
who flips the switch, because that's the person we contact then if this should happen at a future meeting.
Yes.
If you're interested, I'm
So
happy to send an email to ask who should be the point of contact.
Perfect.
I'll do
Perfect.
that right
Thank
now
you.
while we're chatting.
Thank you. That's perfect. Yeah. I will warn you that I have short-term memory loss. I'm convinced of this. And so would I have left that for 15 or 20 minutes, I would have forgotten about it anyway. So thank you for doing it right away.
That's why I write
and
everything down now or put it in my
Yeah.
calendar.
Yeah. It only
and
gets worse.
and I am traveling, so I have only an hour today. I
Okay.
apologize.
Well, I think we only scheduled an hour, and the last meeting that we had intended to have 2 weeks ago, we had a miscommunication or something, and about the time, and so it was. I think we were going to do it at 3:30 instead of 1:30, but then it turned out that Christine and some of the other people weren't able to do it at that time, and so I think we did some quick
Right.
introductions, but we didn't do anything. And so this is
Hmm.
really the first meeting, and the kind of the introductory and overall meeting, as opposed to us having done that all 2 weeks ago anyway.
Yeah, agreed. So all right. Well, it is being recorded. Do we need to wait for anybody?
Christine, you're muted.
Thanks, Anna. I don't know. We don't have to wait for anyone. It's not a live stream. They're just going to post the recordings for
Okay.
people to be able to review at a later
Okay.
date. if they
And
just-
what about weren't there a couple of other people from non-voting people from the group that were supposed to participate? Maybe Jake Hummel, etc. And to what degree do we need to ensure that they're part of the discussions versus being able to hear the stuff later?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jake hasn't been at very many of the meetings. I can't remember one that he's attended since the first meeting. So I
Mhm.
think that's probably something that the commissioners could consider discussing at a meeting or amongst yourselves, because the comptroller also hasn't been participating and neither
Ah.
has Alderman
Mhm.
Bulmer.
Mhm.
If there's interest in, kind of figuring out why, or whether or not, I mean, Bulmer can't be replaced. It's clear in the ordinance that it's the chair of the legislation committee. He can't
Ah.
designee, but
Mhm.
there is a designee from union representation, that's Jake, and then the comptroller is able to also put forth a designee if she doesn't want to attend herself.
Wasn't there a designee for the comptroller at one of the actual full commissioners meetings? I don't recollect exactly, but I thought I remembered there being someone there.
I don't remember that. The
Mm.
only other person who has come to a couple of meetings more frequently than the folks I just named is the director of personnel, Sonia Gray.
Mhm.
Mhm.
She would be able to appoint a designee as well.
Uh-huh. Okay.
As I was thinking through the articles that we have, I definitely think it may be advantageous when we have our public hearings, the public meetings, want to get public support or testimony, to hear from them. So
Yeah.
perhaps request their presence at those specific sessions to get their feedback, even if they can't attend the overall sessions that we have as the working group.
Sure.
Well, and since I see some things related to taxes as part of what we're doing, it seems to me that there must be some, I don't know enough to know how all of that relates to county offices and, the city, what role they have in it through the comptroller's office. But clearly when we start discussing that area, it would be, I think personally, that it would be beneficial to have someone from the comptroller's office talking with us about that particular subject area. Maybe they feel like it isn't as necessary to be talking about, let's say, the introductory language or the Board of Aldermen or whatever. But when it gets to the taxes area, I would think that would make some sense.
Mhm. I was wondering if we could split up the articles we have
Yeah.
and have a session on the Board of Aldermen, session on taxation, a session on elections, and then invite those personnel to those conversations so they're kind of have targeted feedback to give on sessions that are really germane to what they do.
Mhm. Agreed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a great suggestion and something that we should follow through with, because there's no sense wasting the time of these individuals. But we want to be able to engage them where they have the most value to the conversations. And if they would like to come to some of the other stuff, then that would be great. But there's clearly parts where if we emphasize the importance of them being there for those, perhaps they'll be able to break loose in their calendar to be able to do that.
Well, and so I took Jasmine's filter that she asked us
Mhm.
to use, her structure, and I applied it to incorporation and elections, which were our first two.
Mhm.
And it at least from what I was interested in, or what I got out of this, it on elections, I think it was pretty clearly the Board of Election Commissioners would be who would come and give you a call. But when it came to incorporation, and perhaps Christine can give us some insight, but there were various issues, particularly around trust and excise and weights and measures, that it would be interesting to find out more about. So, and I'm not sure which departments that is, other than I think there is an excise department. So,
Yep, there is an excise division.
and what are they taxing, Christine? I can't recall.
Liquor.
Yeah,
So-
that's it.
So they permit, bars and restaurants with their liquor licenses. Previously, it's not the case any longer. I mean, some of us when we were in college, the liquor patrol would come through like a college bar, and everybody would, scamper up the fence
Yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
away from the scene. I don't think that happens too often anymore. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nuts and bolts at this point. And I know it's one of the major, well, not major, it's one of the priorities of the Red Tape Commission. We have a special committee of the Board of Aldermen, led by Alderman Oldenburg, that's tasked with kind of looking at how problematic some of these dated arcane processes are at the board. And that the excise process does come up from time to time. That's like a platinum petition requirement via ordinance, not the charter, for bars and restaurants to get signatures
Mhm.
of property owners within a certain radius. And there's some conversation about whether or not, if a business is in good standing and not causing any issues, if it gets sold, whether or not that
It
would
has
just
to
be.
go through all that again or not.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. I've heard down on South Grand, for instance, that it's a big problem because it takes not just weeks, but months to be able to transfer a license sometimes on an operation, and that can really hamper the restaurant's ability to be able to, to offer full service at that point. And so, yeah, I guess that to me at least brings up the question, what you've just said about Alderman Oldenburg and what he's doing about if there's been some work already done on some of these subject areas that overlap then with our target articles. Then the question becomes, is that in writing somewhere where we would be able to look at some of that to review it, or would it be beneficial to have him speak with us about what he saw as critical issues, or how would we benefit from that knowledge so we weren't recreating the wheel?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess two things. One would be, while I think it's important for you to get up to speed on what's happening, I wouldn't a lot of time to it, because it still doesn't, none of the work that's being done has to do with the charter. It's all ordinance based.
Uh-huh.
But I do think it could be helpful. And so I'll send you the resolution that created the Red Tape Commission, and there's one board bill sitting in it right now that Alderman Narayan sponsored. I'll make sure you all have that as well. But to be really honest, nothing has moved forward. And so one of the things that President Green is doing is has tasked, I think maybe tomorrow after the full board meeting, to talk to Alderman Oldenburg to see if he's actually interested in continuing to serve as
Continuing
chair.
the process. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Great.
and Christine, Daniela actually made outreach and said that the Red Tape Commission would love to come and present to the Charter Commission, but it sounds like they wouldn't have much to present at this point. So
I think the hope is Alderwoman Velasquez is the vice chair. I think the hope is that will be able to help motivate Alderman Oldenburg, or will take over herself. So I'm glad to hear.
Okay. So there may be changes
Right.
occurring in that area anyway, and so we'll wait and see what's happening there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
Christine, who administers trusts then?
Trusts?
Hmm.
Which article are you on?
So that was the trust article is it's in incorporation, and section 1 is that the city, it's one of the list of things it does, which is administer trust. And I wasn't sure if that was individual trust, if that's trust held like, Shaw's Garden or something like that, what that was
Yeah.
relating to. Having established a couple of trusts for my own personal basis, you need an attorney to do it, quite frankly. And
Yeah.
it could live with some streamlining. So
Yeah. while you chat, I'm going to look that up. In our office, we've been doing a comprehensive review of the charter. And
Mhm.
it's not ringing a bell that that was something that popped up, but let me make a determination because there's
And
frankly a lot of language in here in the charter that's so dated, it just doesn't even probably make any sense to have it
At
continue.
all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Scott,
and
what
then
I had thought, I saw that, and what I thought was that that was related to real estate in the city that had been given to the city at that point, not necessarily a trust like you and I might have. So, for instance,
Right.
Tower Grove Park was given by Henry Shaw to the city of St. Louis with lots of strings associated with it. And the city
Mhm.
manages within those strings, but it's also a private entity because of how it was set up. And so I would think that when they say trust there, that they mean something like Tower Grove Park, but it could be more than that. That's what I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so and then who does weights and measures, and what do we weigh and measure, Christine?
First, I just want to let you know I'm going to follow up with Eddie Roth because I have a note to myself for the entire article of incorporation that we were not in our office. We didn't really understand if that needed to continue to exist, why it listed the items that it did, because we weren't able to find something that was particularly similar in anything that had been
Mhm.
done more currently.
Mhm.
And then weights and measures is it's something about like uniformity in like buyers and sellers in the marketplace. I'm not really sure exactly who might have done that back in the past. There are still some state agencies and maybe the federal government that has a weights and measures department. We had a note on that too to
Mhm.
try and figure out where that what current office we have in place would be doing that work now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
I had,
and also,
oh, go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
well, and also on excise, it was linked specifically to the police as well, and that sort of raised a red flag for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would think that that specific language could likely be removed from the charter, but we would want to make sure that the functions were living somewhere else now if they still needed
Yeah,
to.
I wondered if it had something to do with prohibition at that point, and but that was another. But the one that I found kind of weird. I wasn't sure, what was going on there. Was this children, aged, and insane persons?
I love that.
To the degree I'm not sure that the city really has a specific entity that deals with those kinds of issues, because I think that goes back to the time when there were shelters and homes, maybe all these homes for unmarried children, women, and insane asylums and whatnot. But the world moved past that, and Malcolm Bliss is a state entity, right? It's not a city entity. And so I'm just not sure I understand how that language fits within our, perhaps within incorporation, which was way back when, but certainly not in modern day.
The Department of Human Services is where most of those type things would live now. Obviously not with those same titles.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think we may have touched base on it at one of the prior commission meetings, but some of that information is dated because the city used to run hospitals and
Yeah.
clinics
Mhm,
in places where
right.
kids who didn't have parents lived, and that just isn't the
Right.
case anymore. I think there's probably an argument that could be made in both directions of why we would want to keep it that way, or why we might want to reinstitute having city run clinics. Right now, the county, St. Louis County does have clinics. St. Louis City relies on federally qualified health centers to partner with us to provide the services that many other individuals are able to access through the county health department.
Well, perhaps there would be language that could better define the options now and in the future, because what's here now is obviously arcane.
Wow. I'd love to have an actual definition of what a pauper is, though.
Oh, God, I know.
I think I probably fit that description while I was serving as alderman.
Well, there are many students that would claim to be paupers also.
I think a
So
pauper, the
those,
technical definition was that you were receiving like government assistance.
Mm.
oh, okay.
Any kind of government assistance? See, that's where it gets really interesting.
Right. I think it was, like a pauper's grave is, like
Mhm.
I don't know. I think they're in Calvary Cemetery where you're buried
Yeah.
and it's covered by the city type of a thing. I'm not sure how specific they were because I think many of us are the recipients of government assistance and stuff.
Yeah.
Of all
Yeah.
kinds.
That would be quite a can of worms. Um,
Yeah.
well, and I guess, yeah, I guess to me at least, incorporation is really important at the time something is established, and then you want to include within it opportunities for the future or flexibility for the future, so that if there are updates to the corporate papers or et cetera, that there's opportunity for it. But yeah, the level of detail that's here, which quite frankly was from 100 years ago anyway, but even more so, the level of detail that's here, it's not relevant for this stage in a charter, which I think goes back then to at least my thought about a charter versus ordinances. And I was glad you brought that up earlier, Christine, about ordinances, and that a lot of this stuff is in ordinances, and it's becoming clearer and clearer to me. In fact, that a lot is in ordinances. That the charter itself is this weird kind of amalgam of really vague sorts of statements, and then incredibly detailed and many times wrong because it's out of date, because it's incredibly detailed sort of content. And so and it's almost like at various points in the development of the city, there was this tug of war, which there may well have been, between people who said, oh, if we don't put everything in the charter, it'll get lost. And those people who said, no, it should just be the guts, the structure. And I'm not sure that that's a question that we as the commission have really tackled and decided. What is what should the city charter look like? Should it be the framework with the ordinances really driving the detail, so that you don't have to go to ballot every single time you change the charter because you don't have all this gobbledygook little stuff in it? Or is the charter the place where you put absolutely everything, because then nobody can change it at all? And some of it has to do with trust and what people feel. Some of it has to do with just retention and how people feel about retention. But in the end, can we live with a charter that has enormous amounts of detail? And if we say no, we can't, then I think we have to look at some of these articles with a slightly different eye than we are right now. For instance, the incorporation one is like hugely detailed in the wrong way. The Board of Aldermen one is once again enormously detailed in terms of what's there. But we could get over to some of these things like Zoo and Museum District, for instance. It's one paragraph at that point because everything's in the ordinance. So that's very confusing to people who are trying to figure out how government really works, and being able to coordinate the very aspects of government in terms of being able to maximize operational capacity of it. And so I just, that's my thought, at least, and something I wanted to throw out before I forgot about it, is that we really have to think about, are we talking about detail or are we talking about the guts?
So is that a decision, a recommendation that we would make, or do we want to hear from the constituents first in various areas and then decide as a working group what we want to recommend?
My personal feeling is that it would be a recommendation to the commission to discuss, because if the commission has strong feelings about it one way or another, then we want to know about that before we're then opening it up to the public in addition. Clearly, there are going to be people who fall down on both sides. And in the end, there's going to be practical issues that are associated with it. And I would at least appreciate hearing more from the other commissioners, as well as some of the department heads, et cetera, who have to work with this, about how, which strategy really works more efficiently for government. Because in the end, I think that's what we're talking about is operating in an efficient and reasonably flexible, because I think of government and flexible as not necessarily words that go together all that easily. But that's our aim, is to be as flexible as possible within the broad parameters of what are required, by legal and transparency issues.
I guess I just offer up quickly that I think the commission, without intending to, probably skipped a couple of key steps, and one would be to your point. No one has really talked about the history of the charter, how we got where we were, or talked about best practices for what charters kind of should look like now, and that might be something you could consider making a recommendation. There are definitely people in the city of St. Louis who have studied this issue, who could speak intelligently to it, in terms of how we got where we are, and also to, like, the Missouri Municipal League has a model charter that I think everyone was provided with when we started, that seems to be pretty well accepted amongst a wide variety of stakeholders. So that's just something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, we're going to need to report out, the three of us, at our next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a really helpful discussion and frame, and if you wanted to write an official question for the group that we'll pose to the larger group, I think we should.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
Yeah, it's I think that otherwise what we're doing is all three working groups are coming at this from different directions, and we may not come up with something that really resolves the issue. There may not be a resolution to it, but the other side of it is that we should try to figure out if there's a compromise somewhere in there that then we can propose, and the commissioners can comment on, the public can comment on, etc. But these are the kind of issues that I think, as a member of the public, in addition to a commissioner, I would appreciate hearing the rationale and the recommendation of a larger group about first, and then being able to respond to that rather than starting basically with a blank page. And so that's why I'm saying that I think that the strategy of talking publicly about it with the commissioners is the first step, as opposed to talking with the public directly about it first.
Agreed. Thanks. Good.
So I like that idea, and I think that, thank you, Christine, we may want to just discuss if we want to use the model that the Missouri Municipal League has put together and the rationale as our template, as a good starting point for that conversation for our November meeting. I also want to add, I think it's important, if we want to hear from the various kind of divisions of our articles, board, taxes, election, from those individuals in our community, I want to schedule those public hearings sooner than later, because it's November now. I know some tight deadlines that Jasmine gave us, Chair Nichols gave us to meet. So to try to balance this discussion in November with getting some dates on the calendar pretty quickly. Scott's traveling, various holidays, season, for ourselves or constituents, just get those scheduled, let staff persons know, and also the public on these dates. We'll discuss each of these kind of topics.
Right. I think that it might not have to be a separate public meeting to discuss the topic. But my suggestion would be, though, that we publicize, as you say, the meetings at which those kind of topics are going to be discussed, so that if someone has a particular interest in weighing in, then they will know when is the best time to be able to do that. And my sense, at least, is that these are the kind of things we want to do. I agree with you earlier versus later, not just because of the tight timeline, but because these kind of framework issues really establish how we go forward in terms of just the structure and language that we use within the charter itself. I think it's fairly clear to me, looking at the charter that we have right now, that just to update the language is a massive undertaking that will require such a redlined copy that I don't think you can do it based on the current charter. It may well be that we have to rewrite the charter from the bottom up just to be able to come up with something that doesn't look like it's redlined like heck all over the place and people can read it. Well, in those circumstances, then it seems opportune to talk about, well, what's that structure going to look like then when we build it from the bottom up? Are we going to use the same kind of structure? Are we going to use a different one? Is there a preferred one that we should use instead? And maybe we'll settle on the current one, but maybe not.
Okay.
Legal
That's great.
I'm sorry, just from a legal perspective too, I'm still not super clear on what if there are changes that you would like to have move forward in the charter that need to be voted on. What can be grouped together and what would have to be individual, and maybe some strategy around, like, is there a point at which you're asking for so many changes that it's too many and nothing will pass, versus fewer things with more meetings?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's a right answer to that, but it may be of interest to hear some thoughts on expert strategy on some of that ballot piece of it.
Well, and again, I think if we go back to the filter that we were asked to look at these things through, which is good. I mean, I don't know if it's exhaustive, but I think that that's probably a good one, right? And so it makes, if we don't weigh and measure anything and we accept it from the feds or the state or something like that, it's really hard to imagine why you need to have something about weights and measures in the charter, right? So the and to that, again, the only other thing I did was elections, just because I kind of have an interest. But I'm planning on using the filter that the chair woman gave us. Was actually kind of helpful. I mean, not surprisingly, in looking at this, and I did the elections, and just in terms of improvement, it seemed to me that having municipal elections move to August and November of even years, when we vote for the president or Congress, that sort of thing, would be really beneficial, because you get a lot more people out voting. And it's hard for me to imagine why unless there's a special election needed, which is in there as well, and you can call it any time. But it just seems to me that to have them on the same day as federal elections, when 60 or 70% of the people go out and vote, rather than 15 or 20% in the municipal, seems like a good idea. And that was section 1. And then in section 5, it seems like recall, referendum, and initiative also put them on a federal timetable and a federal ballot, either August or November of an even year. I still go back to my idea of making it a simple majority for everything. I think that might be an improvement. And then the notice said that you have to, at least 20 days in advance, put it in both two St. Louis newspapers. Well, we really don't have those anymore. So I think that we can do something in extending the notice, and obviously change and expand and make more inclusive the notification sources. And then section 9 talks about vote registration. And I think that there's probably a host of things that we could look to incorporate to make it easier for people to register to vote and to actually put their vote in. mail, same day, whatever we don't have now. I'm sure that there's other good and tried and tested. And I think then I said, well, yeah, that's innovation, obviously, on notice, registration, adding voting options. And then on the assessment and evaluation, I thought it would be helpful to have the Board of Elections come in and say, would we save money if we put the elections on a federal schedule? And could you project what you think the turnout in municipal elections would be? And it would be, if we actually saved money by doing it, which I suspect we would, and more people voted in them, I think that would, be a pretty positive step forward. So but that's for our work group evaluation, which is the final filter. So
yeah. Well, I think all those are important issues and things that we should be considering as part of the election process. I'm also, in addition to that, interested in new ways of voting or additional ways of voting. When you look at other states and what they're doing, you can do mail-in votes. I come from the state of Washington. They can put their votes in the mail 2 weeks in advance in any post office box or election box at that point. And as long as it's postmarked, by election day, it gets counted, even if it shows up 2 months later. They run a pretty good program up there too. And nobody's ever said that, there's problems of graft or, all the things they say, this is going to be terrible because, people can steal the system away or whatever it is. The reality is that doesn't seem to be happening in states where they have actually moved to other more accessible ways to be able to vote. And so along with changing the dates of the voting themselves, I'd like us to think about, and we don't have to design the system, but maybe we want to think about language that we put in there that's such that it allows the Elections Commission and whoever is in charge of this kind of stuff at later dates to innovate when it becomes advisable to do so. I don't think we have to define everything and how it has to be done, but we want to make sure that we don't put language in there then that prohibits their ability to be able to make changes without another charter amendment.
A couple of things just to keep in mind while you're thinking that. I don't know at what point it makes sense before you go down a rabbit hole, but a couple of the pieces of what both of you just mentioned are function.
You just froze on us, Christine.
With respect to how charters are.
Yeah, could you repeat that? Yeah, it just you locked up on us. Yeah.
Some of the pieces of what both of you mentioned are functions of the state constitution or state law that we're not able to change in the charter or change because we're preempted at the local level. And so I don't know at what point it makes sense, maybe come up with a list of things that are ideas and vet them with the city councilor's office or something, so you don't go too far down a rabbit hole without, spending a lot of time on something that unfortunately we just don't have the ability to control over.
And God only knows, we know that our state is a little bit more conservative in terms of some of these kinds of things. And so I'm not surprised to hear that we can't do some things that make sense.
So now I also remember some email from our chair to department heads asking for reports. And so I think her email asked for them by our December meeting. I think there are things that we need for our working group that are connected. So I don't want to kind of inundate department heads with requests. I also think that maybe more helpful if they come and talk with us in a working group first, so we can talk through the issues and then bring the report to the larger body, and then use our December meeting time to talk about what just recommended in terms of history, how we arrived here, kind of our way we move forward. So I'm not sure the official way to kind of make that request, but we can get information that we need, and then also that's reports from the staff, but not from the public. So how can we get the staff's feedback and also the public's hearing, the public's feedback before we have that full commission conversation? Just to kind of, again, not kind of put the cart before the horse and kind of work out of order.
Well, Anthony, I concur with that. And I think it'd be great at our next Thursday meeting of our group here, if we had the Board of Election, if we could ask somebody from the Board of Election Commissioners who could talk on behalf of that organization attend, and we could ask some questions.
Hmm.
Yeah. Christine, is that possible?
I think so. Let me know if I'm trying to be very careful in the role that I have of not stepping on any toes. I don't want the
Mhm.
commissioner or any of the I'm sorry, the chairwoman or any of the commissioners to think I'm overstepping bounds. But if you all feel comfortable, I'm happy to reach out to Ben Borgmeyer is the Democratic deputy and Gary Stopp is the Republican deputy. They're both very knowledgeable and usually receptive to having discussions. So happy to do that
Mhm.
outreach.
I guess that
Great.
raises a question in my mind because I don't understand. Because we don't have because I don't know who the host or the coordinator is here. If we have requests like this for speakers, etc., through whom should we filter those so that we don't get Christine? Sorry, I keep calling you Christina. I don't know why. I know a Christine. Anyway, but why we don't want to get her in hot water by having her facilitate a meeting that really we should have notified somebody else and then they would have set up the meeting for us and issued the proper 2-week notice and all that kind of good stuff. So I am unclear, and I wonder if any of you are about what the process should be in this case or in cases like this.
Well,
I think that I've had the most success emailing the Charter Commission email, just the general Charter Commission. That's all of the staff in the city councilor's office who has access to. They're the ones who are kind of making decisions and making sure that the meetings get scheduled and noticed up properly. So I'm happy once I hear back, because I did already send the email asking who the point of contact is for starting our working group meetings and what happens if there are issues during them. So I mean, you're all copied on here too, but if in the event you're not, I'll make sure you have that information and then I can follow up with that question if you are all okay with me doing that.
And I do see up in the corner that it says recording. And so the good news is that our meetings are being recorded.
Yes.
And Christine, unless it puts you in an awkward position, quite frankly, you have been very effective. And if you don't mind the extra work, any request we have like that, you seem to take them on and do them pretty quickly and efficiently. And you know these folks, so we're happy for you to do it. I think if it's okay.
I'll clarify, and if we can get Ben and Gary, you want them at the next meeting, which is the
9th of November, I believe, right?
Yes, 9th of November.
Yes.
And we would want the notice for that one when it's posted to inform the public that the Board of Elections Commission individuals will be with us, so that if they have a particular interest in wanting to hear that conversation, then they would know to dial in that day.
Okay.
If the public have comments about their thoughts around needs for elections, how we receive, it's not a hearing, right? So how we receive their comment.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that it's been discussed because the meetings are not open to the public, just available for them to watch and then watch the recording. That it might be something the commissioners discuss at the next meeting so that we have an understanding.
Yeah, I think that the reason they decided to record the meetings and make them available, at least it was discussed with me, and it makes a lot of sense, is that there is content that we discuss in terms of how we get to different kinds of decisions or recommendations. And if they only hear the recommendation at the commissioners' meeting, then we really have to spend a lot of time discussing how we got to that point anyway. And so it makes the most sense to record these meetings so that people would be able to go back and listen to the discussion. But it's not necessarily a time when they are participating in the discussion themselves. They're just trying to assess what our thinking was in terms of getting to certain recommendations that then, when the full group is together, are being discussed.
It may be helpful for buy-in, though, to get the public's input sooner in the process than later.
Mm.
And so we
Oh,
can
I
have
agree with you
a
about that.
discussion.
Yeah, I agree with you about that.
I also, just for the sake of respecting the time of
Mhm.
our city employees, we want to think out to the next 2 working group meetings and schedule Board of Aldermen is also, and also schedule the taxes conversation. We want to plan out that far, just wait and do elections first and then schedule the
Mhm.
next 2.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah, I guess probably you'll want to discuss among yourselves the Board of Aldermen feedback. I think is a can of worms because there are 15 elected officials, including the president
Right.
of the board. I know one of the things that I believe I had mentioned before, the goal of the president's office is to try and gather some of that information from electeds to see if we can come up with something that folks agree on. But yeah, I don't have an easy answer coming to the top of my mind in terms of how best to get feedback from 15 different electeds who all have
Yeah.
rightfully so thoughtful opinions on what should be and what shouldn't.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's incumbent upon the 3 of us to figure out what we want to do. I mean, quite frankly, I'm happy to schedule all the alders to come or schedule President Green to come and give us what she thinks might be some ideas. I mean, we can go about it a number of ways. I think that 2 things I was planning on doing is I don't think I'll get through them all, but I was going to continue to just go through the articles and put that filter to it. And I'll send that to everybody as a matrix because I'm not sure. I think we need to think through what we want to report on the first from our group. Other than to say we met a couple times. But I think to be fair, given our deadline, I don't think we should be shy or feel like we're being pushy, inviting people to come and talk to us and give us their input. It's a lot. We just don't have much time anymore. I mean, after January, we have to have some real ideas here or, not be effective. So
Just a shot in the dark, then perhaps we invite President Green on behalf of the board, perhaps the clerk, because administratively they're working behind the scenes to coordinate the business of the board, and then let all the other alderpersons know so if they want to come and offer their own opinion, they can. But the president could speak on behalf of the entire body should other officials not want to come and give them the option. And we have an hour to piece through if there are diverging opinions. And president.
I think that'd be great, Anthony. It'll almost certainly mean that we'll get other alders to come if we say that Megan's going to come and speak for
Yeah.
them.
I'll reach out to the president's office. Would you, if we do the Board of Elections on November 9th, would you want, oh gosh, I guess the next week would be Thanksgiving.
Yeah, well, perhaps that week, because of the time frame, we would be able to meet, let's say, on Wednesday instead of Thursday. But go ahead and have a meeting that week versus just skip it.
I could do Wednesday if Anthony can.
Yeah,
I was
Anthony,
gonna say I was gonna say I can do it, but does the board close, quote unquote, at some point? Is there a holiday that the board takes?
It's a holiday. I have access to the president's calendar. I'm looking at it. She seems to be available. I do want to run it by her.
Okay.
For the 22nd, and then let's see here.
So my thought would just be in respect to her and family, et cetera, is either Wednesday or push it to the 30th, which is the following Thursday. So in this month, it would be the 2nd and the 5th, as opposed to 2nd and 4th. So whichever works, I'll make myself available.
We'd have 2 weeks in a row where we'd have a meeting then, because we'd also have a meeting the first week in December.
Or the board commission.
Or the
And guys,
second week in December.
I apologize. I need to jump. I will talk to you all soon,
Right.
and you'll be getting
Okay.
emails from me. Thanks.
Okay.
Now, take care.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye-bye.
I am just Christine, in terms of working things out. I don't know about Anthony, but I have a lot of flexibility the 20th through the 22nd of November. And so I could make something work probably with whatever would work with Anthony's calendar. And if that would work with the Board of Aldermen. And I would assume that Scott will be able to work something into. So, obviously if the 22nd is a closed day or whatever, we don't want to break up her family time and whatever, but the 20th or the 21st would be possible too, at least on my calendar.
I think since we lost Scott, I'm gonna just check on the
Yep.
22nd, since we all know we're available.
Uh-huh.
She's not traveling home. And when the board's down, it just means that they're not having a full board meeting. It doesn't mean that people
Right.
still aren't working.
Right.
If you're interested, I can extend the invitation to the president and maybe half of the aldermen, like even numbered aldermen, and depending on who responds, give them 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something like that. And then we can ask again at a later date at another meeting, maybe
Mhm.
for, gosh, when is the next Tuesday? That would be the, let's see, yeah, it would be this December 7th. If other electeds would want to come, does that work?
The 27th.
The 7th
Of December.
December. Wait, no, that's not a meeting day, is it?
The 6th is a meeting day.
Not for
Wednesday
the working group. The
6th.
14th will be the next working group day.
Oh, ours, yeah, the 14th would be the next day, and I'm gonna have a problem with that one at 1:30. Since I have to be somewhere from 11:30 to 1:30, I could start a meeting at 2:15 that day.
Yeah, I'm not gonna, you guys can proceed without me. I've got to keep the days that we locked in, with the exception probably of holidays. My schedule is just too crazy to change the times, but I don't have to be here for all of them. I don't know why these meetings aren't popping up on my. When is the next meeting after the, let's see, this is October 20th. So we meet on the 9th. And the 23rd, and we're gonna try and do it. So yeah, that's what I was saying. Do we meet December 7th or no?
It's the 6th for the larger meeting.
So then we're not meeting on the 7th so we would meet on the 14th.
Right,
14th.
we meet the 2nd and the
The
4th.
28th.
Okay. So I'll see if additional aldermen can come on the 14th.
Okay.
And then you are interested in,
Now, let me ask you a question about the aldermanic structure, since I don't know it all that well. Are there any committees of the aldermen that are the most likely to intersect somehow or another with the charter? I'm thinking of committee chairs as, within the aldermanic structure, and whether there might be a committee here or there that would be the most.
they all do, because
They all do.
yeah.
Yeah, so there isn't one that's more dominant than another from that point of view.
No, but we could ask the chairs. I mean, that would reduce the number. Spencer is over budget and public employees, Boyd, health and human development. Clark Hubbard is housing, urban development and zoning. Volmer is legislation and rules. Schweitzer is public infrastructure and utilities. Narayan, public safety. Cone, transportation and commerce. And then President Green is personnel.
So it wouldn't reduce them all that much, but it would reduce them some.
Yeah, there's 8 standing committees versus 15 elected officials.
So is it fair to ask President Green to summarize what all departments need, or is it better to ask them each to come to share?
I mean, that's your call. I mean, the president definitely is, she oversees the legislative body, but she's not the only opinion in the legislative body.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to give
I think politically, it would probably be better to invite whatever the entity, the body is. We should invite the body at that point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that, I mean, if you're comfortable, I'll just ask folks to come to the meeting on 11/22, making sure that we can get the meeting recorded on 11/22 and because we're missing 11/23, and then ask them to come back again on our additional electeds to come on December 14th.
Yeah. Yeah, if we did an hour each time, or if we had one, it would be too much to do one meeting of 90 minutes. I was going to say if everybody did 10 minutes, that would be, 9 slots, but that's a lot.
Well, and I also, just based on experience, I mean, not everyone's going to respond. Some electeds will and some won't.
Right. Okay. Well, if we set that up then as our schedule, that'll give us some direct opportunities to talk with people about these particular articles, and then I'll do some thinking about this question of the template, the question of the municipal league template, and the overall structure of the charter itself, and pose that question then, how that question can be posed to the commission itself for discussion.
Wonderful. If you all need me in the meantime, let me know. I've got to hop off to jump on
Yeah,
a
no, I've got
Okay.
to run
Thank you both.
too. It's one of those days. Okay.